Hey, this week we have lots to cover, from the Winamp source code drop to the rumored 9.9 CVE for Linux to FairSource, Cloudflare's new server, a release of Ardor, and Valve finally getting sick of Wayland. It's lots of stuff, you don't want to miss it, so stay tuned.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is the Untitled Linux Show, episode 171, recorded Saturday, September 28th. Too many maybes. Hey folks, it is Saturday, and you know what that means. It's time for Linux and geekiness and open source and security and gaming and all kinds of other fun stuff. It's the Untitled Linux Show. I'm your host, Jonathan Bennett, and we've got Rob and we've got Jeff, and it's just the trio today. We are not doing the quartet, but that's all right because there's been a bunch of news, some really cool stuff, some other stuff. We'll get into it.
And stuff.
Lots of stuff. Welcome, guys. Glad you're both here.
Oh, glad to be here. And I think we're going to probably get into some discussion, so it's good that we don't have quite as many stories.
Yeah.
That'll be a longer show than normal with just three of us.
Yeah.
That could
Maximum verbosity.
Yeah. All right. Rob has us up first, and we've talked about this before. We talked about it when it was announced, and now code has dropped. And I've seen this labeled as like a failure to open source, or a couple of different things like that. What's the deal with Winamp?
Let's get into that. Yeah. So earlier this year, we told you that Winamp was planning to release its source code in September. And well, this week it has been released on GitHub, and you can find it yourself there. Last time we talked, it was, there was language in the announcement that maybe concerned us, indicated maybe it won't be quite as open as we were hoping. Maybe we're not going to get the Linux port due to whatever they do, but we didn't know at that time. So let's start by looking at the license. So the code was released this week under their own custom license, and that can be good and bad and whatever, but their custom license, it's called the Winamp Collaborative License. Sounds good, right? And right near the top of the license, they are calling it a copyleft license. Even better, it keeps on going good. So for those who don't know, a copyleft license basically allows you to do almost anything with the code, from editing, sharing, repackaging, distributing, whatever, almost anything you could think of. Copyleft license it's the opposite of a copyright, and practically it lets you do a lot. Unfortunately, they lied. This is not a copyleft license. The original license, I believe it was a 1.0 version, said, quote, users are not, I guess not quote, but users are not allowed to fork the project. But a pull request pointed out that this is against the GitHub terms of service. And so that was removed. It was updated, removed from the license. But there's other things. The other crazy non-copyleft restrictions also apply in this license. And right down there in the restriction section says, no distribution of modified versions. Okay. You may not distribute modified versions of the software, whether in source or binary form. Other distributions, only the maintainers of the official repository are allowed to distribute the software and its modifications. So this is not copyleft. Quite the opposite. I mean, what at all is copyleft about this? So this is source available. You can look at it. You can't do anything with it. You can contribute to them and let them take your work and not let you do anything with it. But, even when they had the non-fork, that actually kind of makes it hard to, fork, do work, merge it back in. Fortunately, they removed that piece. So, the source available, it's not open source, but this isn't the only goof in publishing this source code. So licensed code was also published in this repo. It's like they didn't know what they're doing. They just, yeah, here's what we got, whatever. Even though they knew it was coming and had months to look at what was in there. One of the things people have pointed out is that code from Dolby Laboratories that says right on there, it's confidential, do not copy, do not distribute, copyright, I don't know, 2001, 2004, something like that. This was also has been pulled out, but it can still be found in the change history. So you can still go and look at all that copyright stuff because they just did it through a change or whatever. And then also code for Shoutcast DNAS, DNAS is also in there, which is someone else's project. And then the commercial release of Qt was in there too. Not things that they should be releasing, other people's code. But along with that, there was a leaking of certificates that, fortunately, they actually expired in June. But if these certs if they weren't expired, anyone could just sign the software with those certificates and impersonate Winamp. Say, yeah, this is Winamp software. Anyway, maybe that's not such a big deal, but it's just silly. All this, along with, there's actually some other things that don't really belong in the repo. It's maybe not as harmful, but it really kind of shows that maybe they didn't know what they're doing. For a deeper dive into this issue, I'd really suggest checking out Brody Robertson's YouTube video called "The Winamp Situation is Crazy," because it really goes into this, and you can really see a lot of what I just talked about. It's crazy.
Yes. So Hackaday has been covering this too. And one of the other things, I don't think you mentioned it, but the Hackaday authors have picked up on is it also contains GPL code. So there's that. They have fixed that by just removing the GPL code from the repo, but Winamp has apparently been a GPL violation the entire time it's been available.
Right. Yeah, maybe you should clarify why that's.
No, because it's GPL, an actual copyleft license.
Which means everything else in there has to match that license. They have to be. So that means that it is considered a derivative work of the GPL code, and the license terms of the GPL says that you only get to use this code if the derivative work, the downstream, is covered under a GPL compatible license, which basically just says that you have to make the source available. When you distribute the binary, if someone asks for it, that you give the binary to, when they ask for the source, you have to give it to them in a reasonable way. That's what the GPL says. And Winamp has never been playing by those rules. And so it has always been it's a copyright license violation. It's great. I don't know if it's to be fair or not. Who knows how far back this goes? It probably goes back to Nullsoft, I suppose. Mm-hmm. At least this one thing that you're pointing out, because today it's the Llama Group that owns it, but they aren't the original creators of Winamp. The original creators are Nullsoft. But so all this publishing snafu, you can't really blame the original creators, but the GPL violation, yeah, that probably goes back.
Yeah, it's libdiskid is the exact library that's in there, and I'm not sure exactly how old that particular release is, but you got to figure it's been around for a while.
Yeah,
it's a gift that keeps giving.
It's something.
A lot of proprietary software has GPL in it, and if nobody could tell, it's like, that's not there.
Well, even when you can tell, it's difficult to do anything about it. Without going to court, and that is extremely expensive. And most little projects do not have they don't have the wherewithal to do that, to do a lawsuit over it. So you end up with a lot of companies, especially those from other countries where things are even more lax than they are here in the States. We'll just whatever, we'll ship the code, it's fine, nobody will care.
Winamp infringing the llama's bleep since 2000, says a Charger on a.
Yes, that is exactly what they are doing.
But yeah. So yeah, I speaking of the GPL infringement, I remember a story probably the last few years, like a television provider. I don't know if it was Vizio or who that was, TLC. I don't remember, but I know there was somebody who had like GPL software on there, and people were requesting for that code, and they weren't providing it.
Yeah, I remember that story. They did actually go after them. It wasn't TCL. I think it was Vizio.
I think it was Vizio. But
let's see if we can find out what happens to them. So our next story is also about open source. I'm going to research this and see what happened with that TV case. And we're going to let Jeff talk about the alternative to open source, which sort of terrifies me, but we'll see.
You're not the only one. So as we were just saying, open source licensing issues are nothing new to the Linux world or open source world. And I can't count how many times where people would argue about different open source licenses and which one is correct. You get GNU and various revisions of that, various Apache level licenses, different levels, and many, many others. Which ones are compatible with another one. And it really does get messy. Well, there's a new license called Fair Source being proposed by a software company named Sentry. The new license is going to be called Fair Source, and they've been able to get a few other companies and organizations on board. A few. I know the first thing that our viewers and listeners are asking, well, what is Fair Source? Well, it's a licensing idea that helps companies align themselves with open source software so they're not having issues with current existing licenses. They do want to avoid the negative connotations that exist with proprietary software phrasing. NVIDIA is a prime example of that, right? When they had the closed source drivers in the kernel, people didn't like it. In the open source world, the term proprietary, it doesn't go over very well. Very negative connotations. So, excuse me. To quote Chad Whitaker, Sentry's head of open source, he said, and I quote, "Open source is in a business model. Open source isn't a business model. Open source is a distribution model. It's a software development model primarily, and in fact, it even places severe limits on what business models are available because of licensing terms." He goes on to say that most of the world's software is still closed source. For example, Kubernetes is open source, but Google search is closed. React is open source, but Facebook newsfeed is closed. With Fair Source, we're carving a space for companies to safely share not just these lower level infrastructure components, but share access to their core product. Now that sounds well and good, but it also sounds like a lot of marketing speak. We're going to maximize our synergy to align with our core competencies and our customer needs to maximize our value. What did I just say? A whole lot of nothing. So we've all heard that before. Before we directly say what fair play is, let's talk a little bit how we got there. Now, Sentry, who makes an app for performance monitoring so large companies can diagnose buggy software, had it initially available under a BSD3 open source license. In 2019, the product transitioned to a business source license, which is a more restrictive source available license. The reason for this was organizations would take the software source code that Sentry released and would freely release a product that directly competed with Sentry. Basically, Sentry was tired of doing the work that undercut their business. Now, here's where the devil's in the details. Fair play licensing says, and I'm summarizing here, source code will be available, but it has a non-compete stipulation that prohibit commercial use in competing products. And this is a quote, with the same or substantially similar functionality as the original software. Now, some of the criticism of this license is that it's legally fuzzy and will probably have to be hammered out in the courts, because what is substantially similar? Where's that line? Well, some lawyer's going to get rich figuring that out. Mm-hmm. It doesn't clearly state what is allowed and what isn't allowed, as one critic stated. But fair play does turn into regular open source after 2 years. I believe, if I remember correctly, I think it goes to the Apache 2.0 license, but I will have to check the article to fully get that. So, the whole idea is it's protecting the company doing most of the software work from having their own product freely distributed and harming their business. At this point, I think our story's probably gone on long enough, but I urge everyone to take a look at the show notes because I've highly summarized the article, and there are a ton of links to other documentation, different licenses, supporting documentation, all sorts of that to help support and critique the idea. There's also a ton more on the background of the players, both for and against this idea. So now I would love to hear from Jonathan on what he thinks about this license, or at least the concept.
I am still not hugely in favor of it. I know there are some things people are trying to do with, like, for example, I think, is it Bruce Perens is doing the post open source license. And there's some interesting things there. This one is just, it's the business source license over again, right? It's just that idea.
They mentioned that in the article and talk about it. It's supposed to be slightly freer, but it also, both the business source and this one, like I said, had the legal fuzzy gray areas that.
Mm-hmm. I totally understand the non-competitive. You don't want to put all this time into something and then just have somebody else release it with a fancier logo and then take all your business. But at the same time, I guess if you want it to be that kind of business, then make it proprietary.
So I would even go, and I would say that there's another problem with that, and that means you can't fork it if you can't compete. That's an anti-forking clause, and that sort of defeats about half of the purpose of what open source is all about.
Well, it depends on how it's written exactly. I mean, one could argue that you can fork it, but
then you can't use it.
Well, I mean, you could maybe use it for yourself, or maybe try to be in a different market. I don't know.
Yeah, that maybe would be allowed.
Maybe. There's a lot of maybes. I think that's one of the big problems with this. But, now, I am pretty much a firm believer that when the guys and gals that first hammered out the definition of open source back, it's been 30 years ago now, something like that. 40 maybe. It's been a while. They got it right, and they got it right in some really important ways. And so every time one of these comes along where it's like, we're going to do a new license that fixes all the things that open source gets wrong, but we're going to change it in such a way that we're going to violate one of these. There's 4 or 5 principles of what open source actually means. In just about every case, it's a terrible idea for one reason or another. And I think this falls into that same category. You've had people that have tried to do I don't remember what they wanted to call it, but we're going to write a license where we can exclude one person in particular because we think they're a terrible person. It's this is a bad idea. This is a really, really bad idea. I don't know if you understand this yet. Just know that person will eventually be you. That's one of the reasons why this is a bad idea.
You could, though. You could make it maybe kind of like art, whereas it's not going to be completely open source. But let's say art, you can't take this exact picture or song and release it as yours. Mm-hmm. But if you sample, do a derivative, change it enough, mm-hmm. then you can release it as your own art. Now, maybe there's something, I don't know how you'd say what is enough, but maybe there's something that somebody could do there is okay, you can't take our code and just put your logo on and say it's yours. But, if you add enough to it and change it enough, now it's a new work of art. I don't know.
Yeah, and I get the reason why people would want to do that, but that's not what open source is. I do think that the other license I mentioned, which now I can't bring the name of it to mind, is
The
doing
business
some
license?
No, not the business source license, the post open source. The idea of post open source. Because what they're doing is they're going a step further and talking about things like you've got to leave the data that's produced in control of the end users. And I think that's interesting. They're actually trying to do some interesting things with the post open source movement. I look forward to seeing where that is going to go. But the business license stuff, I'm not terribly interested in it.
As a developer myself, I mean, hobbyist, it's not my profession. So I'm not trying to make millions of dollars off of it either. I know a lot of these licenses require you to keep the copyright intact, so that way you still get the original developers or contributors get their credit. And all I really want in the world is my credit. I mean, money's nice too, but
And a cup of coffee.
and a cup of coffee.
Rob doesn't need fortune or fame. He needs coffee.
Yeah.
I mean, after that, I'll go for the fortune, but just give me the credit.
Yeah. So I did look briefly about the Vizio lawsuit. It is indeed it's between the Software Freedom Conservancy and Vizio. And the latest update that I found was from March of this year. And that is that Vizio tried to get the lawsuit thrown out essentially for standing, saying that, well, the end users aren't actually a party to the GPL, which would destroy the GPL. Like if a court ruled on it in this way, one of the big components of what the GPL says would be thrown out the window. So that would be a problem. That would be kind of bad. So thankfully the court denied that claim, and the lawsuit is still continuing, and the GPL has survived it. And I think at this point they're just waiting to actually go to trial. So that's gonna be interesting. It's one of the first times that I know of that the GPL is really, really being tried in court. And that's real fascinating. So we will, if something happens on that, we will make sure and let folks know about it. All right, I have got some happier news. This is not about a lawsuit. This is not about Winamp being crazy. This is about a company, a project that actually does open source properly and makes some money from it. Ardor has released 8.7 finally. They say in the release notes that they were thinking about just waiting for 9.0 because they have a lot of work already done for that, but the amount of bug fixes and things that were stacking up was just getting to be a lot, and so they've pushed out 8.7. This has some fun things in it, like the ability to reorder tracks by just clicking and dragging. That's been missing for a while. Bunch of MIDI stuff. One of the interesting ones here is that they've got parallel disk I/O, which should make things a little bit more stable while recording and playing back, and hopefully a few less clicks and pops in your audio, which I'm looking forward to that working better. Then a bunch of other things. It's funny. Historically, it's just been, you can use ALSA or Jack, and then they added Pulse Audio as a backend. Well, the Jack backend, they've now renamed to Jack/Pipewire. Because of Pipewire's growing adoption on that platform. And, that's kind of almost like Stallman saying, Linux plus, whatever. I find that quite humorous. I didn't get credited, and that's fine. There is a little bit of me inside of this bit of Ardor. I guess I didn't actually write any of the code that fixes it, but I figured out why you were getting multiple actions repeated on certain touch controllers. So, like when you would hit a Q button, it would queue up 3 times, and it was a pain trying to use certain bits of hardware. I figured out why that was there, and then Paul went in and actually did the fix. But all kinds of fixes, bunches of fixes. I've got this installed already on the machine behind me, and I've not gone in yet to play with it. But Ardor 8.7 looks to be pretty cool. And then they've really teased us for the 9.0 release with some potentially cool stuff coming there. So fun.
So what are you using Ardor for these days now that, all the things I see is you're in? I know we used to do the show in Ardor, but today we're in our stream.
Yeah, we're in Restream. So Floss Weekly, I record the show with OBS, but I mix it in Ardor. So I pipe the video, I SCP the video over the desktop behind me, and then I've got a little bash script that goes in and pulls out the individual tracks and drops those as FLAC files on the hard drive. And then I can just import those straight into Ardor and do the mix there. And I like that because it gives me the ability to use plugins like for noise removal. I could do compression and all that good stuff.
Maybe when I tune up my guitar, I'll have to get Ardor.
So one of the other interesting things about Ardor, and some of the fixes here is for this, is you can do live music stuff with it. And so you can literally tune your guitar with Ardor. You can run a plugin. Like, so Ardor has the capability to run live plugins, and there are several tuning plugins. So you can literally just set up a track to record your guitar, get it going through there live, and then add the plugin over at the side, pull the plugin interface up, and you can tune right there.
Could possibly be better than like another tuner, because maybe that tuner, electric tuner, hears something a little bit different than once it goes through your mic.
I personally find I've done this a little bit. I like the Ardor, the using that plugin for tuning. I found it to be really useful.
Right. I mean, if Ardor is going to be the one recording it, and that's where it's going in,
yeah, makes sense.
You may get a better results tuning from the same source it's hearing here.
I'm just hearing that Rob's auto-tuned.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, you can
get back into music if I can figure out how to do that. Then
there's so much cool stuff. There is an auto-tune. There is an auto-tune plugin. I think X42 is the one that writes that, and it's available in Ardor. I've not gone and played with it.
I'm sold,
but it's in there. You could do. I mean, you could do other fun stuff like just imagine. So you play guitar. Let's say it's electric guitar, and you want to do something with you got an overdrive pedal. You can record both the wet and the dry. You could record the raw from the guitar and the overdrive signal at the same time on two different tracks, and be able to play with those to do different things. So
you could custom mix them.
Or apply another effect on top of them, or replace the pedal altogether, or you could also bounce your audio back through the pedal if you wanted to change the way the pedal was tuned. Make it a little bit fatter sound. Okay, we'll bounce the audio through live. Like oh my goodness, the sky's the limit.
My new album will be coming out in a few months. Anyone who's interested, donate a coffee, and I'll send you the digital files.
Yeah.
And coincidentally, that is the name of the album, Buy Me a Coffee.
Oh, brilliant. All right. Well, Rob, what are you going to do with all that coffee money? Is there a tablet in your future?
I think there's a tablet in your future.
No.
Last week, when we talked about the Radza, I warned you that I would be trying again this week to get Jonathan to buy some more toys. The hardware on this device is similar to the Radza, but in a tablet form factor. So I'm just going to get this out of the way right now. Start out the night by saying that I am going to be a failure this week, and Jonathan isn't going to want to buy this. What I'm talking about is the Juno Tab 3. So before I get into all the great things about the Juno Tab 3, I want to start out with why Jonathan won't want it. Then maybe when I finish up with all the great stuff, he'll only remember the good stuff, and he'll forget about the stuff that he doesn't like at the beginning. So the first thing I know about Jonathan, after doing the show with him for a while, is Jonathan likes his mobile devices to have small screens. Like 7 inches, I think he said. A 7-inch tablet is perfect, he said, for his jacket pocket.
If you show me one of these, I was just thinking about this. If you find one of these one day and you're like, it's a 7-inch tablet, you will probably, now maybe not for this amount of money, but a good 7-inch tablet would be a much easier sell.
To me, a 7-inch tablet is called a phone.
No.
This tablet is a whopping 12.1 inches IPS touch display. So that's getting close to twice the size of what Jonathan likes. So the second thing, Jonathan just already hinted at it, is this thing retails for $699 US. That's more expensive than most of the iPads. It's more expensive than an iPad Mini, or an iPad Air. And I understand this runs Linux, so it's better, but I'm not seeing the Apple premium tax that we've all heard of. What premium tax do we got going on here? I don't know. So, like the Radza, this does come with the Intel N100 quad-core processor. And at first I was a little confused because OMG Ubuntu said that it was only a 1.10 gigahertz processor. And I'm like, well, I guess they had to throttle it down for the form factor. But on the Juno site itself, it has it listed as a 3.4 gigahertz. So that's the same as the Radza. And so I guess it's a 3.4 gigahertz, and OMG Ubuntu had a typo. I don't know. Maybe something changed. Maybe the page had a typo when they wrote it up. I don't know. So it's a 3.4 gigahertz N100, same as the Radza. You're looking at the same chip here. Same SoC. So I'm not sure if the processor is a plus or a minus. What they said about the Radza is it's faster than a Raspberry Pi 5. So that probably pretty good for a tablet. I do wonder though, also with that Radza, it was said that you have to have cooling. You have to have a fan, and I'm not sure how you fit a fan into a tablet. I mean, I know you can have a fan and kind of angle it out the side, but I don't know. We'll see if heat's a problem with that. Otherwise, it seems like a fairly premium device. It has, like the Radza, has a graphics Intel UHD, or Intel UHD for graphics, 12 gigabits of RAM. Storage is a 512 gigabit SSD. Has Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5. 2 megapixel front camera and a 3.7 megapixel rear camera. A micro SD card, micro HDMI, 2 USB-C 3.1s. 5,000 milliamp battery. All sound a lot like what the Radza had, at least one of their options. And it comes with the Courage port, also known as the 3.5 millimeter audio jack. So I'm sure this is a nice premium tablet. It looks pretty slick, I guess. But I went into the story totally hyped, all but the price. But I kind of taught myself down. I'm not as hyped anymore. I think for now I'm just gonna stick with purchasing things like a used Surface Pro 3 tablet from eBay for $125 US. Does that work perfectly fine with Linux? I would love to support one of these, but $699. Maybe next week I could find something for Jonathan to buy. I have pointed in the direction of a couple more, but and I gotta keep doing this. I have to keep trying to find something for Jonathan to buy until his wife sends me a copy my way. Just one copy. It's $5, Jonathan.
A little blackmail there.
Yeah. Extortion, I think, actually.
I think the most telling thing is this story is on a website. It's OMG Ubuntu. They are very pro Ubuntu, and for them to say, "Oh, it's kind of pricey," and your cheerleaders are kind of going, "Oh, that's." There are
a few other tablets that I found. I think they're in the article and other places, similar-ish hardware, and the thing is, they're all about similar-ish prices, some a little bit cheaper, but.
Yeah, so I think that maybe the price makes a little more sense if you see it as a Surface Pro competitor, right? But I don't think that's how most people will see this. So I don't know. It's a hard sell.
Yeah. Well, I guess like I have a Surface Pro 3 used, $125. So I guess I just have to wait for the Juno tabs to Juno Tab 3. There's a 1 and 2, I guess, too. I'll have to wait for them to go on sale used.
Yep. Oh, all right, Jeff, if we want a little bit more power than this little Intel Celeron thing, what does, I guess, Cloudflare recommend?
Yeah, and this is another one Jonathan's probably not going to buy for the price, but it's a beefy little toy here. So now, while this next story doesn't deal directly with open source, we talk a lot about enterprise and servers, and I found this article with the news at Cloudflare going with AMD EPYC Genoa X for their next gen servers. I thought it'd be nice to take a little bit of a deeper dive into what a server actually looks like. I should state there's many different configurations of servers, but this is what Cloudflare uses, and it'll get you in the ballpark of what major companies' servers look like. You can have many configurations, but it gives you a general idea. So the specific processor they're going with is the AMD EPYC 9684X. It's going in a 2U 1N form factor, while the previous generation was a 1U 1N. The U is a unit of measure in the server world, so you can have various heights designated by U, and 1U is about 3.5 inches or 44.5 millimeters. The N stands for nodes and how many are in the server, but they're both 1, so we're not going to worry about that. Now, paired with this new CPU is 384 gigabytes of DDR5 memory with 16 terabytes of NVMe storage and a dual 25 gigabit Ethernet NIC, network interface card. And it's all powered by two 800-watt power supplies. Now, multiple supplies, because if one fails, it'll give a warning. You can yank it out, slam in a new one, and your server never goes down. There's a lot of redundancy in the server world.
Yeah, they also have 2 different power circuits coming in, one for each of those.
Yep. So if you blow a fuse, it stays on. I also thought the article was interesting because they describe how they went through their methodology of picking this new CPU and new platform. For example, they took an extensive survey of the CPUs available. They got in several samples, and then they had 3 standout CPUs that they evaluated firsthand. They actually list in a table in the article the different candidates that they used, their specifications, and what they benchmarked it against, which was the CPU and configuration of their previous server. The AMD EPYC 9684X has 96 cores, the ability to handle 192 threads, base clock of 2.4 gigahertz with a max boost clock of 3.7 gigahertz single core, and an all-core boost clock of 3.42 gigahertz. It has 12 megabytes of cache per core with a total of 1,152 megabytes of cache and a maximum configurable TDP of 400 watts. Do keep in mind, TDP figure is not a direct correlation to power, and both AMD and Intel have some funny math behind those values, and it changes from generation to generation, so it's okay to use it to evaluate how much power is used relatively in a current generation, but it's not a good tool to go cross manufacturers or different generations of chips. So keep that in mind. Now, I'm not going to go into full details of the article because it's rather long, but I think they do a good job of going over the methodology and what they're looking at when deciding to choose the configuration of their next server. Not only do they go over the power and core efficiency, they even talk about the thermal design and how going from a 1U to a 2U chassis, which is an increase in height, would reduce the overall system power because they could slow down their fans and it gave them a power savings because they could also use a more efficient cooler. So there's a lot of great detail into what enterprise looks like when they're deciding what kind of configuration they're going to use. And it should go without saying, but no one is making a decision without a lot of data and testing, because this is going into hundreds, maybe thousands or tens of thousands of servers. A 1% benefit might not sound like a lot, but when scaled to that size, it turns into a sizable difference. Now, I've got 2 articles linked in the show notes, and you can see how they decided on the power and network and the memory and many other factors to come up with your final configuration. And, for those interested in enterprise server workings, this is kind of a good peek behind the curtain.
There is something in here that is the best idea, and I am super excited about it. I don't know that I'm ever going to be able to get a hold of one of these, but I can dream. The DCSCM with Project Argus. It's a data center secure control module. So it's a baseband controller. For those who've ever worked with server motherboards, you usually have the ones that I've seen, it'll give you like 2 gigabit Ethernet ports, and then there'll be a third Ethernet port on it, but the OS doesn't have access to that. That third Ethernet port is just for being able to like get into, usually you use something like remote desktop, or it's web-based. The better ones nowadays are web-based. Be able to remote into the computer and do things like turn it off, reboot it. Some of them will even let you upload ISOs and have like virtual disk drives to be able to make changes. They're really great. The problem is that it's also a terrible idea to expose them to the internet because they tend to have security problems, and you just don't want that on the internet. So, you know, if you have one of those, it's a great, plug them in, but make sure they're only accessible through your VPN. They have Project Argus, which is the baseband controller. It's also got like a TPM on it and a couple of other things as a standalone card that slots into the back. I just think that's great because like if you don't need it, you can buy a computer without it. And then if you decide you do need it, you can buy the server and punch it in there. And then, you know, 5 years down the road, if you still want to use that server, or 6 months down the road, you know, whatever. And something is wrong with that baseband controller, or it needs a security update or what have you. It's plunk it out, plunk the new one in. I think that's great. I think really
that'd be great if you could get one of those cards and just plug them into any old non-server grade server and have those features.
So I was looking at this. It's interesting you say that. I was looking at this and going, I wonder if you could just do that with PCI Express, right? Could you get to enough of the stuff with a PCI Express bus? I don't know. You could do a lot of interesting DMA off of PCI Express. So maybe.
I bet you there's a little secret sauce you'd have to expose to do it with PCIe.
You could run some tiny little operating system right on the PCI card, and I don't know.
For sure you could. The thing that you would run into is, do you have access to everything you need? So like if your machine has a VGA already, you know, if it has a monitor output already, but like, so think of it, you could totally make this work. Make this PCI Express card not only your baseband controller, but also make it a display card and a USB host. And so if you don't have any other display card, then Bob's your uncle, you're in. That's all you need.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest uses I've had is reboot or starting it up if for some reason the host OS went down, somebody accidentally hit shut down instead of restart.
So if you really need to, I'm sure you can reboot the machine from PCI Express. Yeah. Now, maybe a hard reboot, but I'm sure you can make that happen.
Oh, sure.
We're clearing those capacitors.
Exactly.
The thing that caught my eye on that story is how the clock speed was not much faster than the Radza. So,
yeah, well, but I mean, it's got like 64 and 96 cores. Like they're not looking for high clock speed.
192 threads.
Oh well, the Radza had 4.
And when you're figuring that, you know, was it 300? What did I say? 384 gigs of RAM. You know, there's a lot of bandwidth being sucked up, and that's also one of the differences between your home computers and server boards is the amount of PCI lanes they expose to the outside world.
If you buy 25 Radzas and kind of put them together in a cluster, then you get about the same thing. I'm joking.
So interesting. We talked about the PCIe KVM idea. Gearling has an article about something similar from back in 2022. So there are at least people thinking about it.
Yeah, I've thought about different ways to do things like that.
Yep. All right. We want to talk about Wayland. Let's talk about Wayland. So
yes, we do.
Yes, we do. We are fans of Wayland around here. We also get tired of things at Wayland either moving at extremely slow pace, or some of the boneheaded decisions that Free Desktop makes. And it's sort of a double-edged sword. Like we like Wayland, we love the idea of it, but it has problems. Let's just say that people at Valve are also sick and tired of Wayland. So there are two engineers at Valve. We're going to talk about them. Mike Blumenkrantz, and the first link is to his blog, and he's got some stuff there. And then there is also, let's see, what is his name? I want to say it's Josh. I knew it before I tried to say it. I'll find it here in a minute. Anyway, one of the other developers is, like I said, they're tired of things moving so slow. And so one of the first things that was done was the Frog protocols, which, for those that have been a fan of the show for a while or watched things at Wayland for a while, that may actually sound familiar, because KDE already has their HDR support is a Frog protocol. Well, this is an effort to make that a little bit more officially unofficial, unofficially official. It's basically staging. It's basically the same thing that Wine staging is for Wine. They are trying to make Frog protocols the Wayland staging. And this is a place where if you have a neat idea and for whatever reason it's languishing in Wayland, you can just go and try to get it into Frog protocols, and the people there are going to be a little bit more open to pulling in the idea that you've got. It sounds like a great idea to me. And I've got to say, it sounds to me like Valve has forked Wayland. Like, it's a soft fork, it's a friendly fork, but Joshua Ashton, that's the name I was trying to think of. Valve has essentially forked Wayland. And I see this as a shot across the bow to Free Desktop that, if you guys don't straighten up, we're just going to take our toys and go play somewhere else. Along with that, we have the work from Mike Blumenkrantz, who has a series of blog posts where he has made a series of suggestions for how to do governance at Wayland a little bit better. And it's things like, let's not... let's be a little more open to new ideas. Let's try to manage these things a little bit better. Let's specify. So there's things like a timer starts, but it was never specified. Like, once something goes in, it's got 30 days, and then you have to vote on it. Like, there's some things like that in governance, but it was never. It was never specified when that timer starts, and so people were playing kind of loose and fast with that. And then one of the other ones, and this one really tickles me because we've talked about this in the past. So Blumenkrantz has yet another proposal, and it's, let's clean up the idea of the NAC in Wayland, NACK, not acknowledge. And in Wayland, technically speaking, there is a small group of people that are allowed to NAC new protocols, and that's essentially a veto. There's a small group of people that have veto power. And the problem is that people that don't have that veto power have knacked. Sebastian Wick is the one that comes to mind that really has abused this in the past. Have knacked things when they don't really get to, and so this is a. It states. Only people in this file can knack a protocol, which that's not really a change. He also says NACs can only be used for extreme circumstances to block a protocol which does not belong in Wayland protocols. Like, it's veto. We should not reach for veto first. But then, like, the last thing, this is the one that gets me. NACs now carry consequences if they're used improperly, including the potential removal of anyone using them improperly. So we're gonna vaxry them. Is essentially what he's saying. We're going to kick you out of the project for trying to knack things when you're not one of the knackers. It's hilarious. All of this tickles me a lot. I am very, very humored by it. But anyway, he's got, it's like 4 blog post articles in here, and you can then click through and find the actual proposals. And interestingly, they've been received rather well so far, which is good. But Valve is tired. Like, these 2 engineers, particularly at Valve, they are sick and tired of putting up with Wayland's nonsense. And yeah,
well, that's not the only thing these sick guys are working on, but
I just thought, I just thought it sounded kind of like everything I learned, or everything I needed to know about running a software project I learned in kindergarten. You know, we're all going to get along, and we're going to be playing, you know.
Well,
but you know, there is a lot of, and I think this happens all over, and we could make an analogous point. Sounds like to rust in the kernel. Sometimes there's people that like, that's a different idea. I don't like it. Mm-hmm. You know, and I don't know. I'm one of those think outside the box, think of new things, just always evolve, always change, always, you know.
Yeah. I mean, so one of the big problems with Wayland is that it is literally designed by committee, right? Like, that's been its weakness for the longest time. And that committee has a thing for bike shedding every problem. Like, oh, you want to be able to set icons programmatically. Well, what if this and what if that? And what about a security problem that has never, ever been a security problem, but it exists in my mind, and therefore we should block this for it. And just all kinds of weird stuff. We mentioned Brody earlier. Brody has a take on this, and I think I agree with it. Wayland really, really needs a BDFL. It needs somebody in charge that can just make these decisions, because they don't have anyone in charge that can make decisions right now.
I know in my professional life, I never design by committee. I will, you know, come up with an idea, or a small, you know, 2 or 3 of us will come up with an idea, lay out the framework, and then we present it and say, okay, what holes are there? Or, but it's kind of already got a direction, and at least, you know, we got the house framed. Now we can argue about what color to paint it.
Yeah, there's a delicate balance to walk there, because otherwise you just get so bogged down, and everybody's got an opinion on all these little details, and that's where Wayland is. I would imagine that you'll see some places like KDE will start to pull in these different frog protocols and just kind of wash their hands of Wayland for now and just fix stuff, which, yay. But I very much see this as a shot across the bow from Valve saying, you guys need to get your act together, or we'll just go. We'll just play without you. And
realistically, I think you could argue that Wayland's being driven in a large part by gaming, you know, because, you know, I mean, there is a security aspect of it, but, you know, a lot of people like, oh, I want my games to play better. Well, Wayland is one of the things that can help that. Mm-hmm. Well, that's where Valve is, and you know, you're playing in their sandbox now.
Yes, absolutely. So I see it as a positive. I see it as a good thing, and I hope it will be well received and changes get made and sanity reign. But we'll see. Rob, you've got some more Valve news about gaming and the Linux gaming industry. What is the rumor mill talking about these days that Valve might be up to?
So let's keep this going. Valve has completely changed the Linux gaming landscape.
Oh, absolutely.
When they decided to build the Steam Deck on Linux and push to get more Windows games to work on Linux with Proton. Today, a majority of games, Windows games, run great on Linux, sometimes with some tweaks, but for the most part, you can get them mostly working. Even for Linux users not using the Steam Deck, this push has improved gaming for everyone. And, you know, although we aren't done yet taking over the gaming world, Valve may be planning to change the gaming landscape again. One of the things I often like to talk about on the show is our future moving to the ARM architecture. But, you know, one thing we seem to fail to miss every time we bring this up is that Steam games don't work on ARM. And you know, I don't have any ARM. Well, I don't have any main desktops that are ARM that I would be gaming on. So I never even thought about it. I didn't realize it, but that's the case. So if we are to have this ARM future, we need to have gaming, as gaming often pushes the way for technology. And Valve might be getting ready to change that Linux gaming landscape again. Leaks in the Steam DB seem to show various VR and standard non-VR games being tested on ARM64 with Proton. In this leak, it explains that thanks to an open source project called FEX, F-E-X, I think we mentioned it before, but it's been a while, which allows you to run x86 and x86-64 binaries on the ARM64 on a ARM64 host. The leak also mentions Waydroid, the open source app allows you to run Android apps on games, Android apps and games on Linux-based systems, provided you're running Wayland, which is why we love Wayland. But anyway, I digress there. Many in this community appear to be skeptical, exclaiming, there's no way it can be fast enough to be usable, going through multiple translation layers, first going through Proton to get Windows games to work on Linux, and then something like FAX, Box64, I saw people mention to translate that over to ARM. First, if some Windows games can run faster on Linux with Proton than they do on Windows itself today, who's to say there really will be that much of a loss going over to ARM? I don't know. It's likely there is, at the beginning at least. Or maybe they plan to somehow merge these technologies together. They're testing it. Obviously, they think they can do something with it. Steam's not, Valve, I guess, is not. Sure, they failed in some things in the past, but they seem to be rather successful. Either way, even if it starts out to be not very usable in the beginning, the start, this might be the start, that it may take to show the world, there's a market here also. And there's a reason to be on ARM. When Steam first ported to Linux gaming wasn't that good. Did anybody say, why is Steam going to Linux? Gaming on Linux sucks. Maybe people did. Look at it today. And then even when the Steam Deck was first announced, gaming on Linux still had quite a ways to go. And, in just the last couple of years since we've had the Steam Deck, it's gone leaps and bounds. But these actions, they showed the world there was a market. It got the developers to make tiny tweaks needed to get their games to work with Proton so they could run on Linux. There's still work to be done, but these steps forward, like the first steps needed to bring us to a fully ARM future. Maybe it starts out slow. Maybe it doesn't work very good at the beginning, but as people make tweaks and see there's a need there, maybe this is just what we need for our ARM future, the ARM future that we deserve, rather than the ARM future that we struggle to make work,
So there's a couple of interesting thoughts here. Steam has been working on putting Steam on the Chromebook for a while now. And a lot of those are running ARM. So this may be related to that. It may be that Steam is going to release a Chromebook at some point. I don't know, where they're going to partner with somebody that will. But I tell you, the thing that comes to mind when I think about this is a really cool use for VR could be portable VR. And I know there's a couple of companies that have tried that, but you don't do portable VR with x86. It's just not a thing. Yeah. But you can do portable VR with an ARM host. And so, there's been rumors about Valve making another headset.
Yep.
I could see a headset that plugs into like a body pack that's an ARM machine, right? Like you could imagine different scenarios. It's interesting. We will see what happens in the future. There's a lot of possibilities here.
And I'll give you another one. How relevant is ARM going to be if Intel comes out with their 86S processor that gets rid of all the 32 and 16-bit legacy stuff, because they say that they can then become much more efficient and compete with ARM directly with the x86 code?
I'm honestly a little dubious that it's going to make all that much difference. It will make a difference, I'm sure, but I'm not sure it's going to make that much.
Yeah, possibility.
We'll yeah, we'll see. Alrighty, up next is more gaming news. DirectX VK 241 is out, and there's something interesting in there, isn't there?
Yeah, so after Rob's last story, we're going to continue on with more gaming news. So, and I probably am going to screw this up somewhere through here. So it's DXVK, and it's that way. So if I transpose anything, it's my bad. Version 2.4.1 was released, and for those that don't know, DXVK is a Vulkan-based translation layer for DirectX 3D versions 8, 9, 10, and 11. So basically it allows DirectX commands to work with Wine. It gets used in Steam Proton and other emulation tasks, and it's mostly for gaming, or that's where the big majority of the use. It's for other programs too, but games are the meat and potatoes of it. Now, this is a point release, so it isn't a major rewrite, but it comes with a lot of fixes and some fairly significant changes. For example, the memory chunk size is now determined dynamically based on the amount of memory in the application that the application is already allocated. So developers say it should improve out-of-the-box behavior in various game launchers. So if you're fighting a game launcher, this should help ease some pain. Now, there's a fix for where the Vulkan swap chain would not always be recreated appropriately in a native Wayland environment, and it also fixes an issue with descriptor pools growing too large on NVIDIA cards in some situations. Another general improvement is a change in the default shader code generation for DXBC, and now this one really is DXBC, instructions to work around flickering issues in games that use different vertex shaders to render the game geometry in multiple render passes. So I'm sure some of you have seen on Proton where you're looking around a scene in a game, and once in a while, certain textures will just flicker. This should help with that. Now, if you take a look at the article in the show notes, you'll see where they list out the DirectX 9 and the 11 improvements. They also have a list of games and the specific things they fixed. For example, like Batman Arkham Knight, they worked around an issue where the game does not start when it detects an Intel GPU. Microsoft Flight Simulator, they fixed a garbled screen on startup, and The Sims 4, they work around a crash caused by the use of a use after free bug in the game. In total, they list 17 games they've added fixes for, and there's a whole lot of general improvements to make games not crash and to look better. In the article, there's a link to the GitHub page where you can get the latest version, and it should be coming, though, through your favorite distro very shortly, as Steam has started to include it. If you're using another game engine or just need it for a Wine program, it also has tar packages and source code. I also know it should show up on FlatHub very shortly if it's not already there by the time you hear this podcast. So game on.
Very cool. Nice to see fixes continuing to land there. I'll have to go and try some of the games that I've had trouble with and see if this makes things work a little bit better.
And because of this, that's where my command line tip came from.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Shall we talk about the big scary CVS 9.9 from this week?
Wow, let's chat.
Yeah,
let's talk about it. So I first saw this on Twitter when Simone, it's the fellow's name, was talking about how that he found a Linux 9.9 CVE and was getting ignored and it was going to be terrible, and Red Hat has confirmed it. And oh my goodness, the sky is falling. People got a little nervous about this. It is a real thing. There is a problem, but it's complicated. Okay. So it's about cups. It's an issue in cups. And specifically, it's something called cups browsed or cups browsed, which is a little scary when you get your mind around what it does. Cups browsed will automatically install printers that are found on the network. And so Linux has a couple of different ways that it finds printers, one of which is a DNS-SD or SD-DNS, something like that. It's AutoConf. It's one of the ZeroConf services. It'll go out and it'll look for printers, it'll find them, and it'll automatically install them, which maybe that's not what you want. For example, on Fedora, this service is not started by default. On some Ubuntu installs, apparently it is. And so he discovered that on his fresh install of Ubuntu, this service was out there listening on UDP port 631. Well, he got to looking at that and he realized that sending one of these special, hey, I'm a printer, UDP packets to port 631 will trigger a printer install. And in that packet, you can specify, by the way, here's where you go find the IPP, Internet Printing Protocol. Here's where you find the IPP description file, the .ipp, and you can specify any URL. Well, so you put this together and you can send a packet to a machine and it will go grab this essentially printer driver from wherever you tell it to. So we're beginning to see something maybe not great. Okay, so there is a printer driver called Foomatic-RIP, and part of this printer driver is it has the Foomatic-RIP command line specification that you can put inside of one of these IPP files. And so the whole thing looks like this. Here's the whole issue. If a computer is running cups browsed and you can talk to its UDP port 631, then you can send it a packet that it will add a printer using a driver that you specify. And when a print job is sent to that printer, an arbitrary command will run. Like that's it. That's the vulnerability. That's the whole thing. And what's weird about this is like you specifically they gave him like 4 different CVEs for this, right? But when you look at each of the CVEs, it's like, one of the CVEs is UDP port 631 does not require any authorization. It's like by design. Like they designed it to not. It's only supposed to be internal to your network. It's designed to not require authentication. You don't want your printers to have to authenticate to be able to add them automatically. It's like one of the other ones is arbitrary command execution inside this driver. It's like the name of the option is command line. Like you can tell me that that's not a good idea, but it's not actually a vulnerability. It's by design. So each of these, you look at them, it's like it's doing what it tells you it's going to do. It's not a vulnerability. But then when you put them all together, by being able to access a port that may be open by default, you can install a driver, and then all someone has to do is try to print to it, and you execute code. So like there's a problem there. It's not nothing. It's not entirely a nothing burger. But it's one of these weird situations where it's like it's difficult to kind of draw the line of, all right, here's expected behavior. This is a vulnerability. And I wrote about this for Hackaday, of course, and I had somebody in the comments take me to task. It's like, well, obviously, if this is a thing, then it's a vulnerability. And here's the quote: "The system will only be used as intended isn't a security policy. It's somewhere between wishful thinking and outright denial of reality." And I'm like, you can set your password to password and put SSH on the internet. Like, do you really want your computer to prevent you from doing that? You can expose Telnet to the internet. It's a terrible idea. These things that we interact with, they're user programmable machines. You can put them in insecure states if you really want to. At some point, the end user has to take some responsibility for not doing dumb things with their machine. And I would say that exposing cups to the internet is a dumb thing that you should not do with your machine. And even before this came out, we really should have all known that it was dumb to expose cups to the internet. So that's my take on this.
So I only looked at this very briefly, but I thought there was something about somebody could trick you to print something and it would trigger it.
You have to print to the new printer before it will trigger the arbitrary shellcode execution.
Oh, that's right. It was something like it does the thing, but then it doesn't actually trigger until you print to it. Is that? Yeah.
Yep. Because what this driver does is it lets you write like a shell script to handle the data manipulation to print it. And so like you've got some of these drivers that they use this and they will run your documents through a Perl script to be able to format it right for the printer to be happy with it.
Yeah.
So like it's kind of a thing that you need to have, but
like many things on a network, like almost everything on a business network except for some web server type resources, they shouldn't be exposed to the internet. Mm-hmm. And I mean, so if somebody got onto your network and was able to, trigger this from within your network, there's maybe a problem already there.
Yeah, it's not great. It's not like there is actually a problem here. But it's unclear like where the vulnerability exactly lies and what the right solution is to fix it.
So in a business environment, where you have a lot of employees on that network, could, one of the board employees or whatever you want to call them that day, like, I'm going to trigger this on here. And
yeah, no, absolutely. That would be it's very much a thing that someone could do.
In that kind of environment, that's not good.
Yeah, but that would be a pretty insecure network. Usually corporates got that stuff really locked down. And
yeah, so my recommendation is use one of the two commands, so either systemctl or like nmap, and see if this thing is on your machine, and if it's running and listening, just turn the service off. You're not really losing anything by turning cups-browse-d off. So just if it's there, just disable it, stop it, and go about your business. It's not the end of the world. It's not. Oh, by the way, he claimed that he thought it was going to be a CVSS, so the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, a score of 9.9. It is not a 9.9 because you have to have user interaction to be able to print to the printer. I'm not sure what it ended up scoring at, but it's definitely not a 9.9.
I was going to say, if you knew what it recorded in the CVS score.
Yeah, not a 9.9. Last I checked, they hadn't actually given it a score yet. I can go back and look and see. Go back and see if it's been made public. That's not the link that I wanted. That's the link that I wanted. Anyway. Oh, I have the last story, so I can't get one of you guys to stall for me. Oh, well.
Oh, Jeff can talk about nothing. Go for it. Been doing it all through the show already. So.
Oh, ouch. Oh. Shots fired. So anyway,
I was just going to say, here's my commentary on Rob then. Yeah.
Oh.
Bump.
Ouch.
Talking about nothing. Okay, got it.
Yeah. Anyway, so we mentioned something last week that I do want to circle back around to, and I'm going to call this errata. And actually, Rob mentioned it, and it was the idea that Microsoft is locking down their security driver, and that might make it easier for Linux gaming to work. All right, you remember that last week? We talked about that just a little bit. Well,
I remember.
So I heard that mentioned in another context, and it was someone being rather dismissive of that idea. And so I went and I did some research on where this came from. And it is a Notebook Check article that is linking to a Microsoft, what would you call it? It's sort of a... it's a Microsoft blog post, but like it's a industry leaders met together and discussed cybersecurity and resiliency. It's one of those corporate articles, and it does not say very much. It sort of gives you some hints about things that Microsoft is thinking about, but it does not say very much. It does not say that Microsoft is going to lock down what security vendors are allowed to do, and it definitely does not talk about anti-cheat for games, right? So we may have been a little over ambitious in covering this, and this Notebook Check article has gotten called out as being, your guys are kind of just making this up. I don't know if that's entirely fair to say. There are some things that are like slowly moving in the direction of let's not let everything in the kernel. Maybe that's a bad idea, but it's not a sure thing there yet. It's just people are thinking about that now.
Well, I think Steve Gibson talked about that, right? That was part of the cloud strike and getting things out of the internals of the kernel. And the only reason they let him in is because he mentioned that they originally had stuff in the kernel, and then because of Europe and the everybody's got to play fair, they can't have their antivirus, anti-security software tied deep into the kernel and not let anybody else in. So then there was talk of maybe they need to have a higher level API so it doesn't, you kind of keep everybody out of the deepest corners of the kernel.
Mm-hmm. And then Linux just has to mimic or match or have their own API outside of the kernel that works along with that, and boom, you got anti-cheat on Linux.
Yeah. So I wanted to come back and cover that again because, like I said, we may have made a little bit too much of it, but it's not nothing either. And we've actually got the links in there for people talking about it. And the 9.9 CVE Red Hat here ranks it as a 6.1. So not quite the hair on fire experience.
They got a little upside down. Oh wait, I guess that'd be 1.9. But
yeah. Well, all right. Let's talk about some tips. Let's get into some command line tips. I think at least two of us are running command line tips. We're gonna let Jeff go first with curl.
Rob,
did I say? I was looking.
You said Jeff.
We're gonna let Rob go first with curl.
I was like, "You taking my story, Jeff? Come on! Why do you do this to me?" All right. Anyway, I guess it's the curl command. It's not. I don't know.
So it's literally curl. You're literally running curl.
The command it's how to get the weather in the command line, and it uses curl to do that. So what we're doing here is if you type curl space WTTR.in, and if you just do that and hit enter, it will, based off your IP, detect your location. Otherwise, you could do a / and your town. And that will also work. I couldn't figure out necessarily how to do if your town is in multiple states or other locations. I don't know how to do that yet. But simply type in that, hit enter, and it's going to pull down a nice weather. So right here in Mankato, it's 82 degrees, 8-mile-an-hour wind. And then it's got the morning, noon, evening, and night forecast for 3 days. So for today, tomorrow, and the next day. If you want, you can actually, obviously, this is just curling a HTTP site out there, HTTPS site, a website out there. So you can also just put that in your web browser too, and it's going to do the same thing. Fun thing I was doing when I was playing around with this is like, well, what happens? What kinds of automation could you do with this? What happens if you put this into a file? So I did curl space WTTR.in and not pipe, but redirect that into a test.txt file. And now if I look in there with nano, it looks a little messed up. But what's cool, if you cat that file, so cat test.txt, because it's in the terminal, it is reading the formats in there for the terminal.
The ANSI color
you
codes.
Do that, and boom, it looks just as pretty as when I curled it out. So I don't know what you got a quick little way to get the weather in the terminal, and maybe you can do some automations. You could do all kinds of things programmatically with that, and just have fun if you ever want the weather in a script, or who knows. Maybe you can put that in your
Message of the day.
Your message of the day. So when you SSH in or start up your terminal, boom, nice weather forecast. And
that's actually a cool idea. I like that. So I did a little looking on this. You can do a /zip code to also specify where you're at. And
that didn't work for me when I did it.
Works for me. I don't know. And then for whatever reason, it gave me weather in Celsius, and I prefer freedom units. And so you can do a $U at the end to get the US units.
Yeah, I was just going to ask that very thing, because I pulled it up and I'm like, hey, it's all metric. I don't know what any of this means.
Oh, okay. I did the zip code now. Maybe I had the wrong slash. I don't know. But so I guess you can do /zip code.
Zip code.
Yeah, as you saw with mine was the freedom units. And I didn't do anything special. So
for whatever reason, WTTR does not see me as American enough for that, I guess. All right. That's fun, though. I like that. I may have to make that part of my my message of the day, or part of my shell script for my prompt. All right.
Yeah. So the weird thing is, it does work with my zip code, but it doesn't necessarily work for other zip codes. I put in the zip code for a town where I work, and it gave me someplace in Deutschland.
Odd.
And so it's a zip code in Deutschland too, I guess.
I guess.
Whatever, because it's
mine worked.
This. Koblenz, Rheinland dash Saal 560 Deutschland.
Rob's
so
getting relocated.
It's
not perfect.
Yeah. Derechos points out that oddly mine's all in freedom units. So what it does is it tries to figure out, like, it uses IP geolocation. And it says, okay, where is this IP address probably coming from? And it'll give it to you based on that. And so it depends upon whether you have an IP address that in their geolocation database comes up with being in the US or not. So for whatever reason, mine does not.
Did you try yours without the slash? And did it get your right location then? You know, just the curl WTTR-IN?
Mine, it says weather report not found, but then it also gives me weather, but it doesn't have like a town. So I don't know where mine is coming from. I don't know.
It doesn't know where you're at.
It has no idea where I'm at. Which makes sense. So wherever it is currently 33C, and it's going to be a high of 28C tomorrow and 21C the day after that.
Well, I did read something. I can't remember that if it can't find it, like it'll do a 404 and it'll give you the weather for a town that's the coldest place in the world or something.
I don't know if that's the coldest place in the world, but it's colder than it is here.
Said somewhere. I don't know where I read that at.
Because I think 22C is about 70 Fahrenheit. Something. I mean,
it sounds nice. I would prefer it to be that cool as opposed to the, you know.
And it may not be the coldest place in the world today, but like I think historically. So when you do that, I get Oi Mayakan is the weather report at the top.
I see.
And it's only 30 Fahrenheit right now. So I mean, I don't know. It's just summer there,
I guess. All right, let's talk about Proton tricks.
Yeah, so this kind of can be both. You can run it in a GUI or in the command line. And I kind of hinted at this. So my last story generated this tip. So a little background. I was playing a game and they did an update and it started crashing for me. Whatever they did really wrecked up the gaming for me. It just made it unplayable. And this was on Steam. So I went to Proton Hub or Proton Database and looked at, the suggestions and how people tried to fix it. And long story short, I found where they said Well, you need to install the latest DXVK to make this work. And they also suggested Proton Tricks to install it. Now, I'm sure many of you have heard of Winetricks, which will install special libraries or DLLs to make Wine work better with specific programs or Windows itself. Well, Proton Tricks does this same thing, and it does require Winetricks, but it will install special libraries and other code that will make your specific application your gaming application run. Proton Tricks itself is just a script that runs on top of Winetricks to give you a more targeted install of what you need to make your games run. Now, there isn't a lot to know about it other than you run it, and it's pretty self-explanatory. If you go by the GUI, you just go by the menus. If you want to change something to make your game work better or make it work at all, Proton Tricks is how you do it. And you just select what you need, and it's good to go. Probably the easiest way to get it is off FlatHub. So when you run it, it will then ask, you get it off FlatHub, start it up. It asks you where your Steam is located, gives you a list of games that you have installed, and then you can decide what you want to install for that specific game. Now, I should note that if you have not run the game at all, it will not find the game. So you need to at least have tried to launch the game once. In the show notes, I've linked the FlatHub and the GitHub for everyone, so it can, you can continue to have a great gaming experience.
Very cool. All right. I will probably be doing that soon after I install my shiny new NVMe hard drive. Upgrade. All right. I've got one that came up doing some work stuff this week, last week, sometime relatively recently. We are doing some custom hosted GitHub runners, and one of our guys had a problem with the runner seeing the same name coming up multiple times, and GitHub did not like that. So I thought to myself, well, surely there's a way to just get some randomness from dev_random and express that as, let's say, a couple of hex bytes. Okay, so I've figured out a way to do it. I don't think we've ever talked about this before, and so here's a real quickie for you. XXD -p-l2 dev_random, and that will go get 2 bytes out of dev_random, and it'll print it as hex bytes, and it'll output it. And so you can run this as part of a script. You can use the backticks to run it and just use the output that it gives you. And so we now some of our GitHub runners, it's for example, JP1 is one of mine. So it's like JP1 dash and then 4 random hex characters, 2 hex bytes. And that is enough to keep them from colliding, because GitHub will clean all these ephemeral runners out after 24 hours anyways. So if you just need a couple of random bytes of hex, there you go. That's the quick way to do it. And I tell you, if you go looking for the way to do this online, you will find some answers where people are like, here's this Perl script that'll do it for you, and here's how you do it in Python. How do you do it? Just on the command line. It should be quick. It should be a really short command for this. Here it is. I found it. All right. That's it for command line tips. And for news, it has been a lot of fun. Been a lot of stuff going on this week. And I very much enjoyed it. We're going to let each of the guys get the chance to either get in the last word or plug something, or I suppose both if they want to. Rob, what do you have?
All right. This week, I have something really special for you. I have on the screen the place you can come and connect with me. And that is at robertpcampbell.com. And on that website, you'll see this right here that you see behind me with a spot to my LinkedIn. I've had some people connect with me there recently. Spot on my Twitter. Honestly, I'm not very active there, so I'm not sure if anyone's connected there recently, but you can tell people you're my friend there. Mastodon, I am more active there. I check that regularly and post, try to post often-ish. And then here is a spot to donate a coffee to me. And you know what? I got an idea. Since these other guys like Jeff and David when he's on, and Ken, since they don't have a public persona like this, if you want to donate them a coffee, if you want to donate a bunch of us coffee, 4 coffees, and just put in the comments, one's for Jeff, one's for Ken, one's for David, one's for Rob. You can go ahead and do that, and I'll make sure they get it. And all they have to do is check on it and see if their name is on there, and then they can call me out on the show that, hey, where's my money? so just do that in the comments. I'll make sure they get it. And if you don't want to give it to everybody, if you want to exclude Jeff, I completely understand. You could just put David, Ken, and Rob, and have 3 on there. And it's right there.
The shade getting thrown. All right, and Jeff,
that was I gotta say that one was pretty good. That was point for Rob on that one. If you want to connect with me, I guess LinkedIn, but you'll have to probably just go find Rob, and then I'm friends with Rob on there, so you can connect with me that way. But it's just Poetry Corner, nothing too crazy. Cables have been cut southwest of northeast east of somewhere. We are not amused. Have a great week, everyone.
I remember rolling out to a job where somebody called us up. Our telephone system's down. We can't make phone calls. We roll up to this place and we go inside and we're like, clip on with the butt set. And well, no. Okay, we're not getting anything from AT&T. And then you walk out back to the van to go back to the next stop. And you turn and like they were up on a hill and you look down between the houses and you see a digger and 3 guys standing around it looking down into a hole. And we're like, I think we found it. And yeah, that's what it was. They trenched through it.
Yeah, somebody going, hey, there's cable here.
Cuts.
So what?
Construction cuts like copper and fiber happen.
Yeah,
way
a lot
more often than you'd realize.
Yes, and so what they were doing is we went down there. We talked to them about it too, and they're like, pull out a tape measure and like, that's totally 12 inches away. Because they got it marked, but it's like if you hit it and it's within X number of inches of the marking, well, you get to pay for it. They're like, no, we were fine. We're not going to have to pay for that, I hope.
Well, it happens with gas lines too.
Ooh, yeah, that's even worse. Yeah. But yes, it does.
And side note, I know somebody who works at a gas company and handles calls for stuff like that, and it makes it worse when they're like, well, we're trying to pinch it off, and it's like, no, just
walk away calmly.
Yeah. It
far
makes
away.
Much more.
Yes.
Yeah, sparks, backs pressure. Don't want to do that. There's your safety tip of the week.
Yes. Just walk away. When you trench through something, just walk away and then call it in. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you guys for being here. I am, of course, Jonathan Bennett. You can find my work primarily at Hackaday. We've got Floss Weekly, and the security column goes live there. The security column on Fridays. Hackaday we record, or Floss Weekly we record on Tuesdays, and it goes live every Wednesday. We have a lot of fun with that. If you do feel like I've earned a tip, just because I'm one of the cool kids and I have a Buy Me a Coffee as well, that mine is just /J Bennett. Keep it real simple there. We do appreciate everyone that catches us live and those that watch us on the download. And hey, we will see you next week on the Untitled Linux Show. Hey folks, do you enjoy the show but just wish you could have more? Want to be more plugged into TWiT? Well, you should jump on Club TWiT. It's about the price of a cup of coffee per month, and it gets you access to Discord, it gets you access to the shows without the ads, and a whole bunch more. Really need to check it out. Come join Club TWiT today.